I lost £582,000 in 18 months. Not through bad investments, not through a market crash, not through gambling or drugs or any of the things people assume when they hear a number that large. I lost it because I trusted someone I loved, and because Thai property law doesn't give a damn about what you think you own. I'm James. I'm 67 years old. I spent 42 years as a civil engineer, working on infrastructure projects across the UK. I was good at what I did. I understood load-bearing calculations, stress points, foundation integrity. I could look at a building plan and tell you exactly where the weaknesses were. I could predict failure points before they happened, but I couldn't see the structural flaws in my own life until the whole thing collapsed on top of me. I grew up in Bradford in a council house with 4 siblings. My dad worked in a textile mill until it closed in the 70s. Then he bounced between factory jobs until his back gave out. My mom cleaned offices at night. We weren't poor, but we knew what it meant to count pennies. I was the first person in my family to go to university. I worked construction jobs during summers to pay for it. By the time I graduated, I had calluses on my hands and a degree in civil engineering. I thought I'd figured out how to escape the life my parents had. I did, in a way. I built a career. I married Susan when I was 29. We had 2 kids. We bought a semi-detached house in Leeds. I worked long hours on motorway projects, bridge rehabilitations, airport expansions. Susan worked as a school administrator. We saved money. We went on holiday to Spain once a year. It was a good life. Not exciting, but solid, predictable, safe. Then Susan left me when I was 62. She'd been having an affair with a teacher at her school for 3 years. I didn't see it coming. I should have, looking back, the late nights, the new gym membership, the way she stopped asking about my day. But I was focused on work, on saving for retirement, on making sure we'd be comfortable. I thought we were building something together. Turns out she was building an exit strategy. The divorce took 2 years to finalize. She got the house because she'd been the primary caregiver for the kids, even though they were both adults by then living on their own. I got my pension and about £620,000 from the settlement and my savings. At 64 years old, I was single for the first time since I was 28, living in a rented flat in Harrogate, and realizing I had no idea what to do with the rest of my life. My mate Colin had retired to Thailand 5 years earlier. He'd been sending me photos for years, beaches, markets, cheap beer, smiling women. I'd always dismissed it. That wasn't for me. I wasn't one of those men. But after the divorce, after 2 years of living alone in a flat that smelled like old carpets and regret, I started looking at those photos differently. Colin kept saying the same thing. Come visit, just for 2 weeks. See what you think. What have you got to lose? I arrived in Phuket in January 2022. I remember walking out of the airport into that wall of heat and humidity. It felt like stepping into a different world. Colin picked me up in his truck, this beat-up Toyota that would never pass an MOT inspection but somehow ran perfectly. He'd gone native, as he put it. Sandals, baggy shorts, Thai girlfriend half his age. He looked happy in a way I hadn't seen him look in the 20 years I'd known him back in the UK. He'd set me up in a guest house in Rawai, on the southern tip of the island. It wasn't fancy. Small room, basic bathroom, air conditioning that rattled like it was trying to escape through the window. But it was clean and cheap and a 5-minute walk from the beach. That first night, Colin took me to a seafood restaurant right on the water. We sat at a plastic table with our feet in the sand, drinking cold beer that cost about £1 a bottle, eating grilled fish that had been swimming that morning. The sun was setting over the Andaman Sea, turning the sky orange and pink and purple. This is what life should be, Colin said. No stress, no rain, no council tax, no expensive everything. Just this. I didn't believe him then. I thought he was just selling me on his own choice, justifying his own escape. But sitting there, watching Thai families playing in the surf, listening to the sound of the waves and the distant long-tail boats, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I could breathe. I met Kratae 3 days later. I wasn't looking for anyone. I wasn't one of those men who come to Thailand specifically for that. I was just trying to figure out if I could actually live here, if this could be more than a holiday. I'd gone to a spa for a massage because my back was killing me from the flight. The place was called something like Paradise Thai Massage, one of those shop fronts with the traditional wooden decorations and the smell of lemongrass oil. She was the manager, 29 years old, though I didn't know that at first. She had this way of smiling that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. She spoke decent English, better than most of the other staff. After my massage, she asked if I'd enjoyed it, if this was my first time in Phuket, where I was staying. Normal questions. Customer service. But there was something about the way she asked, like she actually cared about the answers. I came back 2 days later for another massage. She was there again. This time she sat with me for a few minutes after, asking more questions. Was I retired? Did I have family? How long was I staying? I found myself telling her about the divorce, about not knowing what to do with my life. She listened in a way Susan hadn't listened to me in years. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer advice. She just listened and nodded and occasionally touched my arm in this gentle, reassuring way. The third time I came in, she asked if I'd like to have dinner with her. Just as friends, she said, to practice her English and show me some real Thai food, not the tourist versions. I said yes. I told myself it was just dinner, 2 people being friendly, nothing more. We went to a small restaurant in Chalong, the kind of place with no English menu and plastic stools instead of proper chairs. She ordered for both of us. Dishes I'd never heard of. Som tam that made my eyes water. Gong som that was sour and spicy at the same time. Pla pao with sticky rice. She taught me how to eat properly, mixing the rice with the curry, using my fingers instead of a fork for certain dishes. She laughed when I struggled with the spice levels, but not in a mean way. In an affectionate way, like I was endearing rather than foolish. She told me about her life. She was from Nakhon Si Thammarat originally, a province I'd never heard of, a few hours north of Phuket. She'd moved to the island when she was 22 to find work. She'd started as a massage therapist and worked her way up to manager. She sent money back to her family every month. Her father had died 5 years earlier, so she helped support her mother and her younger brother who was still in school. I appreciated the honesty. She wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't. She came from poverty. She worked hard. She took care of her family. That felt real to me in a way Susan's middle-class pretensions never had. Susan was always worried about what the neighbors thought, about keeping up appearances. Kratae didn't seem to care about any of that. She just cared about surviving and helping the people she loved. By the end of my 2-week holiday, I was seeing her every day, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just for coffee, once for a day trip to the Big Buddha. She never asked me for money. She insisted on paying for her own meals, which I found charming at first, though I wouldn't let her. When I flew back to the UK, I genuinely didn't know what would happen next. We stayed in touch. WhatsApp messages every day, video calls twice a week. I'd wake up in my flat in Harrogate, gray light coming through the windows, rain tapping against the glass, and I'd look at my phone and see photos of her on the beach, sunshine and blue water. The contrast was almost painful. I was in my 60s, retired, with no purpose and no one to share my life with. She was young and beautiful and seemed to actually enjoy talking to me. I started to wonder if Colin had been right, if maybe this was where I was supposed to be. I went back to Thailand in April, this time for a month. I rented a small apartment in Rawai, a 1-bedroom place with a kitchenette and a balcony overlooking a small garden. It cost about £300 a month, less than a week's rent would have been in Harrogate. Kratae came over most evenings after work. We'd cook together, or order food, or just sit on the balcony drinking beer and talking. She started staying over. Not every night, but often enough that I started thinking of the apartment as ours rather than mine. It was during that month that she told me about her family situation. Her mother was sick, diabetes, the medication was expensive, and the local hospital in Nakhon Si Thammarat wasn't very good. Her brother wanted to go to university but couldn't afford it. The family house needed repairs. The roof leaked during the rainy season. She told me all this matter-of-factly, not asking for help, just sharing her worries the way you do with someone you're close to. I gave her 50,000 baht, about 1,200 pounds at the time. I told her it was for her mother's medication. She cried and tried to refuse it, but I insisted. It felt good to help. It felt good to be needed. Susan had never needed me, not really. She'd had her own career, her own money, her own life. Kratae needed me, or at least I thought she did. When I went back to the UK in May, I already knew I was going to move to Thailand permanently. I'd done the math. My pension was about 2,400 pounds a month. In Thailand, that was a fortune. I could live well, travel, eat at nice restaurants, and still save money. In the UK, it barely covered rent and bills. The decision felt obvious. Colin thought I was moving too fast. He pulled me aside one night when Kratae wasn't around and said, "Look, mate, I'm happy you're happy, but you've known this girl for 4 months. Don't do anything stupid with your money." I told him I wasn't stupid. I was in love. He just shook his head and said, "Those two things aren't mutually exclusive." I ignored him. I moved to Thailand in July 2022. I got a 1-year retirement visa, which required me to show 20,000 pounds in a Thai bank account. That was fine. I had plenty more than that. Kratae helped me with all the paperwork, translating documents, taking me to immigration offices, explaining the bureaucracy. I don't know what I would have done without her. The Thai system made no sense to me. Everything required 3 different forms and 4 different photocopies and stamps from offices that were only open between 9 a.m. and noon on alternate Tuesdays. We moved in together properly in August, into a nicer apartment in Kratae, closer to the beach, 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a view of the ocean. The rent was 500 pounds a month, still cheaper than anything in the UK. I was happy, genuinely happy for the first time since the divorce, maybe for the first time in decades. It was Kratae who suggested buying a house. We were lying in bed one morning, the sound of the ocean coming through the open window, and she said, "Why are we paying rent? You have money. We could buy something, build equity, have something that's ours." It made sense. I had 620,000 pounds sitting in UK accounts earning almost nothing in interest. Property in Thailand was cheap compared to the UK. I'd been looking at listings online. Nice houses in Rawai or Chalong for 150,000 pounds to 200,000 pounds. In the UK, that wouldn't buy you a garage. Here, it bought you a 3-bedroom house with a pool. But there was a problem. Thai law doesn't allow foreigners to own land. You can own a condo, but not a house with land. The land has to be in a Thai national's name. Kratae explained this to me patiently. "It's to protect Thai people," she said, "so foreigners don't buy up all the land. But it's okay. We put it in my name. But it's our house, our home." I hesitated. I'd read about this online. Other expats warning against it, saying you could lose everything. But those were other people's situations. They didn't have what Kratae and I had. We were partners. We were building a life together. And besides, I trusted her. I'd spent 6 months with her by this point. She'd never asked me for money except that one time for her mother, and she'd tried to refuse even that. We started looking at properties in September. She wanted something in Chalong, close to her work, close to the main temple, in an area with lots of other Thai families. I wanted something closer to Rawai, closer to the beach, quieter. We compromised and looked in the area between, around Soi Ta-iad. We found the house in October. It wasn't new, but it was well maintained. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a small pool in the back, a covered carport, a garden with mango and papaya trees. The kitchen needed updating, but the bones were good. The structure was sound. As a civil engineer, that's what I looked at first. The foundation was solid, no cracks in the walls. The roof was metal, not tile, which meant it would last. The wiring looked recent. The plumbing was fine. The asking price was 18 million baht, about 420,000 pounds. I offered 16 million. The seller countered at 17 million. We settled at 16.5 million, about 385,000 pounds. I paid in cash. Well, bank transfer, but the full amount, no mortgage. The money came from my UK accounts, transferred to my Thai account, then transferred to the seller's account. The house was put in Kratae's name because it had to be. That's the law. I remember the day we got the keys, November 15th, 2022. We walked through the house holding hands, planning which room would be the guest bedroom, where we'd put the sofa, what colors we'd paint the walls. She was so excited. She kept saying, our home, and I believed her. It was our home. I'd paid for it, but it was ours. We spent the next month renovating. New kitchen cabinets, new bathroom fixtures, a bigger water heater. I hired contractors to repaint the entire interior. I bought furniture, a big screen TV, a proper bed, a dining table. I probably spent another 25,000 pounds on making the house perfect. Kratae chose most of the decorations, Thai style mixed with some Western comfort. It felt like a real home, our home. Christmas 2022 was the happiest I'd been in years. We invited Colin and his girlfriend over for dinner. I cooked a roast turkey, which took me 3 hours to find at a specialty import shop and cost a fortune. Kratae made Thai side dishes. We drank wine and laughed, and Colin admitted he was impressed. You did it right, he said. You found someone real. You built something real. I proposed to her on New Year's Eve. We were sitting by the pool, watching fireworks over the bay in the distance, and I asked her to marry me. I didn't have a ring. I hadn't planned it. It just felt right. She said yes. She cried and said yes and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. We got married in February at the local district office. A simple ceremony. Her family came down from Nakhon Si Thammarat. Her mother, her brother, 2 cousins, an aunt and uncle. They were lovely people. Poor, yes, but kind. They thanked me for taking care of Kratae. Her mother held my hands and said something in Thai that Kratae translated as, "You are a good man, a good husband." After the wedding, her family stayed at the house for a week. That's when I gave them 100,000 baht, about 2,300 pounds. I told them it was a wedding gift. For her brother's university tuition, for her mother's medical care, for the house repairs they'd mentioned. They cried and tried to refuse, but I insisted. I had the money. They needed it. What else was I supposed to do with it? Things were good for a while after that. Kratae quit her job at the spa in April. She said she wanted to focus on the house, on being a wife, on maybe starting a business eventually. I didn't mind. My pension was enough for both of us. She took care of the house, cooked meals, handled all the Thai language things I couldn't manage. Bills, immigration paperwork, shopping at the local markets. I worked on the house, fixing little things, maintaining the pool, tending the garden. We fell into a comfortable routine, but then things started to change. Small things at first. She was on her phone more. Long conversations in Thai that she'd take outside or in the bedroom with the door closed. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say it was her mother or her brother or a friend from work. She started going out more in the evenings, meeting friends, she said. Shopping trips to Phuket town that lasted all day. She'd come back with a few small items that didn't seem to justify 6 hours away. I didn't think too much of it at first. She was young. She was allowed to have a social life. I didn't want to be the controlling older husband, and she was always sweet to me when she was home, cooking my favorite dishes, massaging my shoulders when my back ached, sleeping curled up against me at night. I told myself I was being paranoid. This was just what marriage looked like. People needed space. In June, her brother needed money for university. Another 80,000 baht, about 1,850 pounds. Then in July, her mother needed surgery, 120,000 baht. about £2,800. Then in August, her cousin's business was failing and needed a loan, 60,000 baht. I gave the money each time. What else was I supposed to do? They were family. My family now. This is what you do for family. But I started to notice the pattern. There was always an emergency, always someone who needed help, always a problem that required money to solve, and Kratae was always the intermediary. I never spoke directly to her mother or her brother or her cousins. Everything went through her. When I suggested maybe I should talk to them myself, maybe use Google Translate or something, she got upset. They are shy, she said. They don't want to bother you directly. It's not polite. By September, I'd given her family about £15,000 since the wedding. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I was spending money faster than I'd planned. My UK accounts were dropping. I was still comfortable, still had plenty left, but the trajectory was concerning. I'd done the calculations. At this rate, I'd burn through my savings in 10 years. I'd be 77 with nothing but my pension. I tried to talk to Kratae about it. I explained that we needed to be careful, that we couldn't keep giving money away, that we needed to think about our own future. She got quiet, then she got angry. You think I'm using you for money? She said. You think that's all I care about? My family is poor. They need help. I thought you understood. I thought you cared. I apologized. I told her I did understand. I did care. I was just worried. She cried. She said she was ashamed of her family, ashamed that they needed so much help, ashamed that I thought she was taking advantage. I felt terrible. I held her and told her it was fine. We'd figure it out. I was sorry for bringing it up. And just like that, I was the bad guy for being concerned about my own money. That's when she suggested I go back to the UK for a visit. My daughter was getting married in October. I hadn't seen her in over a year. Kratae said I should go, spend time with my family, that she'd take care of the house while I was gone. I didn't want to go. International flights were expensive and exhausting at my age, but my daughter was getting married. I couldn't miss that. So I booked a ticket for mid-October. 3 weeks in the UK. Wedding, some time with my kids, see some old friends. Before I left, Kratae was especially affectionate. She cooked all my favorite meals. She made sure the house was spotless. She kept telling me how much she'd miss me, how hard it would be without me. The night before my flight, she cried. Don't forget me, she said. Don't stay in England. This is your home now, with me. I left on October 12th, 2023. Kratae drove me to the airport. She kissed me goodbye at the departure gate and made me promise to call her every day. I promised. I flew to London, took a train to Leeds, stayed with my son for a few days before the wedding. The wedding was lovely. My daughter looked beautiful. My ex-wife was there with her new husband, the teacher, but we were civil. My kids seemed happy to see me, though there was a distance that hadn't been there before. I'd been gone for over a year. I'd built a new life without them. They were polite but not warm. I called Kratae every evening. She always sounded happy to hear from me, asking about the wedding, about my kids, about the weather. England was grey and cold and expensive. Every pint at the pub cost £6. Every meal out cost £40. I couldn't wait to get back to Thailand. I spent time with Colin's brother, who still lived in Bradford. He'd heard I was in town and wanted to meet up. We had lunch at a pub in town. He asked about Thailand, about married life, about the house. I told him everything was great. He looked uncomfortable. I don't want to speak out of turn, he said, but Colin mentioned that you'd bought a house. In her name. That's the law, I said. Foreigners can't own land. I know, he said. But mate, there are ways to protect yourself. Leasehold agreements, usufruct contracts. Did you do any of that? I hadn't. I didn't even know what usufruct meant. He explained that it was a legal right to use property even if you don't own it. It would have protected me if things went wrong. But I hadn't done it. I just transferred the money and signed the papers in Thai that Kratae had assured me were standard. I'm sure it's fine, I said. "She's my wife." He nodded slowly. "I'm sure you're right. But maybe when you get back, talk to a lawyer, just to make sure everything's proper." I didn't want to believe there was anything to worry about, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I started thinking about all the money I'd given to her family, about the documents I'd signed without reading, about how her phone was always face down now, about how she was always out with friends but never invited me along. I called her that night and asked if everything was okay at the house. She said everything was perfect. "Don't worry. Enjoy your time with your family. I'll see you soon." Her voice sounded normal, cheerful, loving. I told myself I was being paranoid. I flew back to Thailand on November 2nd. Kratae picked me up from the airport. She seemed happy to see me. She hugged me. She asked about my trip. We drove back to the house. Everything looked normal from the outside. But when we got inside, I noticed things were different. Small things. A new TV in the living room. New gold jewelry on the bedroom dresser. A new motorbike in the carport that hadn't been there before. When I asked about them, she said she'd bought them. "With what money?" I asked. She got defensive. "I work," she said. "I save." But she'd quit her job in April. She didn't work. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to her, listening to her breathe, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, after she left to meet a friend, I started looking through papers in the house. I'm not proud of this. I was snooping in my own house, but I needed to know. I found the documents in a drawer in the bedroom, the land title deed, the chenote. It was in Thai, of course. I couldn't read most of it, but I could read the numbers. I saw 16,500,000 baht, which was what we'd paid. But there was another number below it, 8 million baht. I took a photo and sent it to Colin's girlfriend, who spoke Thai. I asked her what it meant. She called me an hour later. She sounded upset. "James," she said, "that document shows a mortgage. For 8 million baht. That's not possible," I said. "I paid cash for the house." "I know," she said. "But according to this, there's a mortgage on the house for 8 million baht, about 186,000 pounds. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "When was it taken out?" "October 18th, she said. 6 days after you left for England." I sat down on the floor. I couldn't breathe properly. She'd taken out a mortgage on our house while I was at my daughter's wedding, a mortgage of 186,000 pounds. The house was in her name. She could do whatever she wanted with it, and she had. When Kratae came home that evening, I confronted her. I showed her the document. I asked her what the hell was going on. She tried to deny it at first. Then she got angry. "You don't understand," she said. "My mother needed surgery. Real surgery. Not the small thing from before. She would have died." 186,000 pounds for surgery? I said. "Not just surgery," she said. "My brother's tuition, my cousin's debt, the house repairs, family things. I couldn't keep asking you. You said we needed to be careful with money. So I did this myself. You mortgaged our house without telling me?" "It's my house," she said. "My name, my decision." That's when I knew. That's when I finally understood what Colin's brother had been trying to tell me. It wasn't our house. It had never been our house. It was her house. I'd paid for it, but I had no legal claim to it whatsoever. And now it was mortgaged for 186,000 pounds that I'd never seen, for family emergencies that may or may not have been real. I called a lawyer the next day, an expat lawyer in Phuket town who specialized in these kinds of cases. He looked at my documents and shook his head. "Did you sign a lease agreement? A usufruct contract? Anything?" "No," I said. "Just the purchase documents." "Then you have no legal protection," he said. "The house is in her name. The mortgage is in her name. If she stops paying the mortgage, the bank will foreclose. You'll lose everything. And there's nothing you can do about it." "Can I sue her?" I asked. "For what?" he said. "She owns the house. She's legally allowed to mortgage it. You gave her the money as a gift. There's no contract that says otherwise. I sat in his office feeling like an idiot, a complete idiot. I'd given this woman £385,000 to buy a house. I'd spent another £25,000 renovating it. I'd given her family another £15,000. I'd trusted her with everything. And now I had nothing. No house, no legal recourse, nothing. What are my options? I asked. You could try to negotiate, he said. Maybe she'll agree to pay you back, or transfer the house into a company structure where you have more protection. But legally, she doesn't have to do anything. If I'm being honest with you, most of these situations don't end well for the foreign partner. I went home. Kratae was there. I told her we needed to talk. I explained what the lawyer had said. I asked her if she would transfer the house into a company, or pay me back, or do something to make this right. She refused. This is my house, she said. You gave it to me. I'm not giving it back. I didn't give it to you, I said. We bought it together. No, she said. You gave me money. I bought a house. My house. That's when I noticed her phone buzzing on the table, a message in Thai. I saw a man's name I didn't recognize. I grabbed the phone before she could. She tried to take it back, but I held it away from her. I opened the message. I couldn't read the Thai text, but I could see the photos. Photos of her with another man, at a restaurant, at a beach, in a hotel room. Who is this? I asked. She didn't answer. She just stared at me with this cold expression I'd never seen before. Not angry, not sad, just cold. How long? I asked. Does it matter? She said, and that's when I knew it was over. All of it. The marriage, the house, the life I thought I'd built. It was all gone. I found out the rest over the next few days, through Colin, through other expats who knew people who knew her family. The mortgage money hadn't gone to her mother's surgery. It had gone to buying a car for her new boyfriend. The previous emergencies had been real enough, but they'd been exaggerated. Her mother had needed medication, but not £2,800 worth. Her brother had needed tuition, but not £1,850. The extra money had gone elsewhere, to her family, to building a life that didn't include me. The house was already being transferred to the boyfriend. Not legally, not yet, but he was living there now. When I tried to go back a week later to get my things, he answered the door. He barely spoke English. He just said, "This Kratae house now. You go." I stayed with Colin for 2 weeks while I figured out what to do. I contacted the police, but they weren't interested. It was a civil matter, they said. Contact a lawyer. I'd already contacted a lawyer. He'd told me I had no case. I contacted the British Embassy, but they couldn't help either. You should have protected yourself, the consular officer said. We warn people about this all the time. I'd lost the house. I'd lost £385,000 in the purchase. I'd lost £25,000 in renovations. I'd lost £15,000 in family emergencies. I'd lost another £35,000 in furniture and personal items I'd left in the house that I'd never get back. I'd spent £15,000 on visa runs, flights, the wedding, everyday expenses. In total, over 18 months, I'd lost about £475,000, plus the emotional cost, plus the mortgage she'd taken out that I'd never see a penny of. I left Thailand in December 2023. I flew back to the UK with 2 suitcases and about £140,000 left in my accounts from my original £620,000. I'm staying with my son in Leeds until I can find a flat to rent. At 67, I'm starting over. I'm living off my pension of £2,400 a month, which in the UK barely covers rent and basic expenses. I had to go back to work part-time at a DIY shop just to afford groceries. Kratae is still in the house. I see photos on Facebook sometimes, posted by mutual acquaintances. She's with the new boyfriend. They look happy. The house looks well maintained. My mango trees are bearing fruit. The pool is clean. It looks like a beautiful home. It is a beautiful home. I paid for it. People ask me how I could have been so stupid. They say the warning signs were there. They say I should have known better. And they're right. The signs were there. Colin tried to warn me. His brother tried to warn me. Hell, Colin's girlfriend probably knew something was wrong from the beginning, but I didn't want to see it. I wanted to believe that I'd found love. I wanted to believe that age didn't matter, that cultural differences didn't matter, that money didn't matter as long as we cared about each other. But money always matters. Love and money can't be separated, no matter how much you want them to be. When there's a significant wealth gap, when one person has everything and the other person has nothing, the relationship isn't balanced. It can't be. There's always a transaction happening, whether you want to admit it or not. I don't blame Thailand. I don't blame Thai women. I don't even really blame Kratae, as much as I want to. She saw an opportunity, and she took it. I was 64 years old with more money than I knew what to do with, and she was 29 years old from a poor family. Of course she was going to take advantage of that situation. I would have done the same thing if our positions were reversed. Maybe not in the same way, but I would have protected myself and my family. The problem was me. I ignored every warning because I wanted the fantasy. I wanted to believe I was special, that my situation was different, that the rules didn't apply to me because I was a good person with good intentions. But the rules do apply. They always apply. Thai property law exists for a reason. The warnings exist for a reason. Other expats tell their horror stories for a reason. If you're reading this and you're thinking about doing what I did, don't. If you're already in this situation, get out now. Talk to a lawyer before you buy property. Set up proper legal protections. Get a lease agreement, a usufruct contract, something that gives you rights if things go wrong. Don't put the house in your girlfriend's name just because she's your girlfriend. Don't trust that love will be enough. It won't be. And if someone tells you their mother needs emergency surgery for £3,000, or their brother needs tuition for £2,000, or their cousin's business needs a loan for £1,500, ask for proof. Ask to speak to the family member directly. Ask to see medical bills or tuition invoices or business documents. If they can't provide proof, if they get angry that you asked, that's your answer. That's your sign to walk away. I'm 67 years old. I should be retired, living comfortably, maybe traveling a bit, enjoying my grandchildren. Instead, I'm working part-time at a hardware store, living in my son's spare room, trying to figure out how to stretch £140,000 for the rest of my life. I lost more than money. I lost time. I lost dignity. I lost the ability to trust anyone. I look at other people in relationships now and I wonder if they're all lying to each other the way Kratae lied to me. Or maybe I'm just broken and I can't see love anymore without seeing a transaction. The house is still there, on Soi Ta-iad in Chalong. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, small pool, mango and papaya trees. It's worth about £400,000 now because property values have gone up. Kratae could sell it tomorrow and walk away with a £400,000 profit on a house she never paid a penny for. Maybe she will. Maybe she already has. I don't know. I've stopped checking Facebook. I'm telling you this so you don't make the same mistake I did. I'm telling you this because no one else will. Everyone wants to sell you the dream of retiring to Thailand, of finding love with a younger woman, of living like a king on a pension. But no one tells you what happens when the dream ends. When you're sitting in a lawyer's office, being told you have no legal rights to the house you paid for. When you're watching your life savings drain away. When you're flying back to the UK at 67 with nothing but 2 suitcases and the knowledge that you're the world's biggest fool. The rules aren't different in Thailand. They're exactly the same. Property law matters. Contracts matter. Legal protections matter. I just wanted to believe they didn't, and that belief cost me everything.